So here's today's webinar on setup data and defaults. I'm going to start out with the handout that we have available. Here's the handout. So this handout is available on today's webinar, and I'm sure that when we have it on the video, it'll be available down at the bottom of the screen. It's an interactive PDF file so that when you have your FrameReady program, these are the things that we want you to go through when you first get it, to after opening it up, to make sure that you have these things done. It's going to make things a lot easier for you in the long run. I'm going to go down to the section here that's interactive, and this is where you've got a section that it says your business setup, your logo. If something's done, you can put an entry into the box. For some reason mine works that I can put a check mark in there to say things are done. And if you do want to go specifically to a certain section, you can click right on the blue text where it says logo, and it goes to that particular section in the PDF. If you want to go back to the checklist, just click on any of the items on the right-hand side that say back to the checklist, and then you can go to any other section and then move back again. So that's available as a handout. It's also available on our website. Out with your FrameReady program, I know that a lot of people say that they don't want to start using FrameReady right away. They want to wait until everything inside it is perfect. And I'm going to tell you there's another way to do that. And what I'm going to suggest is that when a customer comes in and has an order for you, go ahead, take out your paper and pencil. However you're pricing out the order currently, go ahead and do that. After the customer leaves, go back to FrameReady, and that's when you're going to pull up the FrameReady screen and start entering in the work order. And this is going to do 4 things for you. One is that it's going to help you to learn the program. It's going to start to build up your order history. It's going to show you which components are missing in the drop-down lists or things that you need to rename, change them, modify the wording so that the wording that is in FrameReady is typical of what you use in your frame shop, and that way everybody knows what it is. If you call acid-free foam board, foam core AF, then change the name to say that. Change the terminology to be something that's familiar to everyone and makes it easier. Also, it's going to show you where the prices need to be modified, where things are maybe inconsistent with your pricing, but start out this way. The other thing that you want to do is that when you're creating those work orders, and I'm going to go right back into FrameReady now to show you that. And once you've created the work order, and if the price doesn't match the price that you have created on your old version, however you've been doing that, then use the lock price in the top right-hand corner. Lock the price in. It's a before tax price. So whatever you quoted on the work order, let's say it was $275, okay, and it's now changed it to that number. And of course, this person has a discount, but it's changed that. And then when you click the Post to Invoice button, you are already starting to document your history. You got it locked in at the price that you quoted to them, and now you are gathering all of that information, your customer information, your orders, your money that's coming in, and it's all going to be accurate to what you were doing before. So start using FrameReady right off the bat. Now here are a couple of places that we want to go in and take a look at the setups that you can do. We're going to start out by going into the setup data in the top right-hand corner. And there are several different tabs in here, but the ones that we want to look at right away are the Info tab. Make sure that your business information is in here correctly. If you have a Facebook page, if you want to put that in there too, you can. This is going to appear on the printed documents that you hand out to a customer. So if you want your any of the other items in there, just remember it will take up more space on the list. It isn't interactive, it's on a printed document. I would suggest those items you may want to put into the email that you send out so that people can click on your link and go directly to it. But you can include them in here as well. Make sure that you've got it set for imperial or metric, depending on which country you're in, and then put your country headings in so that if it isn't correct, then you can go through and change these to be whatever the headings that they should be for your area. So I'll leave those as US for now. And we'll carry on. Moving on to the next tab, this is your Fiscal tab. In your Fiscal tab, you want to have your opening year date, your business number, the currency that you're currently working in, Okay, and then you want to put in your tax rate, most important. So before you even start to create the first work order or invoice, you want the tax rate to be in here correctly. If you have a VAT or a GST or HST, then you can put that in there. Otherwise, you can just say that it's going to be tax. If you have two taxes, you might want to do tax 1 and tax 2. Another option that I've seen people do is that you might want to have C tax, city tax, or county tax, or state tax. That's another option for you as well. But go ahead and put those in. If you aren't using tax 2, you can leave that blank. I usually leave it on here for mine when I'm training with people so that we know why those fields are there and I can explain them at that time. The next one we want to take a look at is the Operations tab. On the Operations tab, this is where you set up the days that your business is open. This is also used when you're deciding when a customer is going to come in and pick up their order. These are the days that they can pick. You may be open 7 days a week, but if you only want people to pick up 2 days a week, then you can mark those 2 days. And that will cause all of your orders to be due only on those specific days of the week. If you enter in your business hours here, this is going to appear on your emails that you send out to people. So it's great that you can just change it in one setting and it goes to all of the emails that you send out anytime that you include your business hours. Of course, if you are working in the metric version, make sure you select metric and then your paper size. Down here, very important. This is one of those pieces that helps you regulate the flow of traffic in your business. This is the maximum number of pieces per day, and you want to set that so that you have enough time to receive orders coming in as well as deal with people who are picking up their orders. So you want to balance that flow. Once it reaches the maximum number of pieces per day, it's automatically going to go to the next due date. So if you do have this set very low and you're finding that your dates are getting too far in advance for you, it may mean that you need to increase that or increase the turnaround time. The turnaround time is the time from when the customer drops the order off to the time that they pick it up. And if you want to inflate that a little bit, if you usually work with a 2-week turnaround and you want to maybe give it 18 days instead or 21 days, knowing that you're going to be done before that, and the customer says, wow, that's great, they always get things done so quickly, I wasn't expecting it yet. And that way, if somebody does want it at a special due date, you can say it's promised or a rush order for them. If you need to change this due date, the last due date, you can do that and change it to a different date on here as well. If it's already moved ahead or if you want to move it forward, you can do that. The other thing that you can do, and I know some people do this, they say, do not set a due date. This means that you will not see a due date. There are other options in the program that you can select to say, I don't want the customer to see the due date. You can see the due date, you know what needs to be done and when it needs to be done, but it isn't going to transfer that information to the customer. And we'll take a look at that as well. There's also an option here to add or exclude dates, so that if you have certain dates that you want to exclude, such as a holiday that's coming up, so we can put that in there and say it will not fall due on that day. And you can also put others in there in advance if you wanted to say, for Christmas this year, we're going to be closed on the 24th. You don't have to put an explanation in if you don't want. And then when the dates are passed, you can remove them as need be. So I'm going to go to the next section that you will want to take a look at in your setup, and this is your email section. And we will include in the links help for you on how to set this up. You can use the client email, which means that you're going to use the email that's built into your computer. So if you're using Outlook or if you're using iMail or a mail on your Mac, whatever you're using on your computer, that's what the client is. Otherwise, you can go to SMTP and you can preload settings for AOL, Gmail, all of the other components. You'll just need to fill in the information on your password and everything else and then test it. We also have an option that you can use HTML email instead of using plain text email as well. So choose whichever one is going to work best for you and set that up. Another section that people may not be aware of, but it's really good to set up ahead of time, is your footnotes. These are disclaimers that appear on all of these documents, all 7 of these documents that you can have added in ahead of time. You may be wondering how much text you can actually put in there. And one of the things that I did was I set it up ahead of time to say, let me see how much text I can put in here. And so I just went through and to show you that this is the amount of text that you can have in that box. It's a little bit limited. If you don't need a signature, then that's fine, or you just want to have their initials so they can initial it as well. But it gives you an option to say, I can have at least several lines of text in there. And this is on the printed work order that you're not going to give to the customer. This is an in-house document just for you. So if you need their signature on the document saying that they approve the work being done, then go ahead with that. So you can set up into each one of these the disclaimers that you want. And then once that's done, if you need to change anything in here, just come back to the footnotes and change things. Maybe you want to also use the invoicing section for advertising things that are coming up, such as, you know, watch for our open house, watch for our gallery specials, any of those sort of things that are coming up. The next section is the logo section. This is helping to market your business. Anything that you hand to a customer will have your logo on it. If it doesn't have your logo on it or your business name, then it is an in-house document. It is not intended for a customer to see this. And I'm going to show you the example of that so that if you were to go to the work order and print out a copy of the work order, you'll notice your logo does not appear anywhere on here. However, if I was going to give the customer a proposal or an estimate, you'll see that the logo does appear on this document, letting you know that this is a customer-facing document. And that's basically the rule of thumb. If your logo is on it, you can give it to the customer. If you don't see the logo on it, do not hand that document to a customer. Going back into the setup data, there are several things to consider when putting your logo in here. If you have a logo, a PNG, a JPEG, you go ahead and add that in there. This logo does not have an address on it attached to it. So that's why I have the box checked so that the address will appear on there. If I don't have a logo at all, then what will happen is it's going to use the information that I have in this box. If you don't have a logo, but you have a font that you use, one of the things that you can do is that you can actually change the font down to locate the font. When you click on the font, you may need to go over to the right to select the style of the font as well. And now that font is in there. And when I click on a document, let's just go to an invoice. Okay, and when I click on the invoice to give it to the customer, you'll see that it shows the name. Now, if you have a really long business name, obviously it's going to push things over to the side. So you may actually want to change the way your business name appears when you go to print it out with that carriage return in there. When you go to print it out onto the invoice, you'll see that it doesn't take up as much room. The other thing that may happen is that you may have a font or a logo that has the address already attached, and check that box. Go ahead and select your logo. Now the thing is that if your address is fairly small that's on there, remember that when it appears on one of those documents, it's going to be very small type. So you may want to reconsider using a logo that doesn't have an address on there so that the address can be a little bit larger. Moving on to the next section. This is something that's new in FrameReady. This is the backup section. So FrameReady doesn't make automated backups. You do need to click on the backup now button in order to make a backup. But you can choose whether it's going to go into your documents or into the desktop, and then you'll have a backup. Now, of course, these are just keeping it on your computer, which isn't necessarily the safest thing. It's a start, okay? But you would want to take that, save it onto a USB drive, or move it to an external hard drive. So that's a fast and easy way for you to make a backup. The other option is for you to say that I want to save it someplace else. And you can click on that and say, where do you want to save this? I want to save it into my external hard drive. I want to save it to somewhere else, find the path, and once you've selected the path to say where it's going to go to, and I'm just going to pick something in there to say, yep, that's where it's going to go, and now it's going to move it to that path, and you can back it up. If I was to say that it's going to go into my documents folder, then when I make a backup, it's going to show me the backup, and it takes all of 2 seconds to make the backup. So it's really fast and easy, and it says, do you want to see the backup? I'm going to say yes, and you can see all my backups, and it's dated it so that I know where the backup is. Now I can go into my FrameReady backups folder, take that, save it onto USB, put it onto a hard drive, and I know it's off the premises. It's going to be safe should something happen to the computer. The other thing that I would recommend that you might want to do is make a backup every 2 days. So here's one. It says that this is going to create an alert. I didn't mean to, darn, I made a backup already. If I hadn't made a backup and I went in here, you would see a red button down at the bottom of this screen. So that would mean that I haven't made a backup during the 24 hours that it's talking about, or the 1 day that it's talking about. And you can click right on that red button and then click the button that says backup. So if that red button does appear on your screen, take a moment to just click on that to make a backup and make sure that you have a copy of your safe program and your information is safe. So those are the things that are in the setup data that we wanted to take a look at. Chrissy, I think we're ready to start a poll, so go ahead.
Sounds good. All right, we're going to launch it here. 1 second. And how confident are you using FrameReady? Very confident, but always learning. I'm confident with the screens I use all of the time. I know the basics, and help, it's all new to me.
There we go. We know that we have a lot of different people that are using FrameReady. So we gave you lots of options.
Yeah.
And Chrissy, do you have any questions?
I don't, but
okay.
You know, I just wanted to say how glad I am that you brought to attention about the backups and how important that really truly is, because I don't know how many calls that we get where people have thought they lost everything, but thankfully due to the backups, they still could find what they needed.
That is so true. And if you are using FrameReady on a server FrameReady on multiple computers, then your server is set to automatically make backups for you. So that's fine. You don't have to worry about it if you have a server. But if you're using FrameReady on a single computer, then it's important that you make sure that you have backups and you set the backups.
That's great. All right, I'm going to close the poll. It looks like everyone has voted.
Okay.
And I will share results.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, that's good.
It's an even tie on 3 ways. That's amazing. That most people, when they start to use FrameReady, the sections that they use are the work orders, the contacts file, and the invoices. So those are the ones that people use mostly. And then as they delve into it a little bit more, they start going more into the price codes and setting that up. They might start using the products. And then finally, they start to use the purchase orders. So these top 3 are at the top of the screen for a reason. Those are the ones that people use the most. The next thing I want to talk about is that when you receive your FrameReady software program, really important for you to check the vendors that are in it. And I want you to go down to the bottom right-hand corner. You can see that there's the number 6 here, which tells me that there are 6 vendors that I have not updated, that are the ones that I use in my FrameReady program. This is not based on every vendor that's out there, because we have over 200 vendors that we work with, just the ones that I'm working with. So you want to click in here, find out, are the vendors that you use listed in here? If there are vendors in here that you do not use, then go ahead and use the remove button on the right hand side to remove the vendors that you do not use, if there are any in here that you don't use. If there are some missing, this is your opportunity to go up to the top of the screen and click on either USA, Canada, or other to find the vendors that you use and take a look at the list. Use the little letters at the top to go to that one certain section. If there's a vendor in here that you're using, then go ahead and just click on them and put them in. Otherwise, take a look through them. You can scroll through the list as well rather than using the shortcuts at the top if you want. But once you've clicked on the name of that vendor to add them in, that vendor that you're missing, what it's going to do is it's going to walk you through a series of steps. It's going to show you the name of the vendor and say, is this the right vendor? If this is the correct vendor that you've selected and you want them in, click the proceed button. It's going to walk you through the steps of adding in that vendor. It may take a few extra minutes the first time when you put that vendor in because you're doing all the presets to say, do you want to order it as length, chop, or join? Do you want to add these in? Yes, all of those steps. But it's well worth it because then in your list of vendors that you have under My Vendors, it will just show you your vendors and that one will be added in. To make it easier for you when you're doing your vendor updates, because I know that I have 6 vendors that need to be updated, I can tell that by the X's on the screen here. These are the vendors that have available updates. This shows you the date that's on my computer. That's all the molding that's on my computer is dated in 2019. The newest update, though, is from 2021. So that means I want to get the newest update. So I'm going to either click on that vendor and it will do the update for me. But because I know that I have 6 of them, I can use the button in the top left, the green button, to update all 6 of them at once because I have preset this using the Process Unattended. And in order to set that up, if the vendor has not been set up, the button is gray. If it's set up, then the button is green. So I click on the gray button and it asks me a series of questions that you need to answer, all of them. So I'm going to say, yes, I want a Process Unattended, which means it's going to do the update and I can walk away, but it needs to know all the new molding that's coming in, not the one that's currently in there, but the new items coming in. Do you want them to be ordered as length, chop, or join? And then once you've made your selection, do you want to import all the new items? Well, yes. Do you want to print a list of every single new item? No, not really. Do I want to flag them as not verified? The ones that are discontinued, we believe them to be discontinued. Our first step is to say that they're not verified. So yes, I want to know which ones I can't receive. And then do I want to print a list out of all of the discontinued items for this particular vendor? I'm going to say no. If you do want to print a list out, you can do that later on, or you can do a find for just the recently discontinued items. But if chances are, if you have never removed a discontinued item in there, it's going to print a list out of all of the discontinued items since you've been using FrameReady for that particular vendor. So once I click off of that, you can see that this is green now. And then if I click on the vendor update button in the top left corner, it's going to update all 6 of those vendors. Those of our Canadian clients who are watching this, there is another tab that you need to look at, and that is the vendor codes tab. This is the supply price chart that you receive from the vendor. So if you are purchasing by join or pricing by join, you want to use that paper chart that they send to you saying if it's 18 United inches and it's a code 4, this is the retail price that you would charge specifically for this vendor. So every time that you come in to update your vendors, check the list and see if what the most recent update is. And if it's for a supplier that you use, then by all means go ahead and run the update. If you're not sure, run the update. The other tab that's important in this screen is the Notes tab. And if you go into here and you see the word new in the top of that Notes tab, that means that there's a note in here that you have not read. So once you click on the Notes tab, the new button goes away and it's telling you that there's a note about a vendor. So if we've had any problems or concerns about a vendor or something's changed in there, we're going to let you know about it in here. So click on the Notes tab. It's going to tell you what's happened there. So there's a small number of items that were incorrectly marked as not verified. You need to run the tab again. And it has all the instructions on what you need to do for each one of these on how to fix it, depending on what it was that happened. So I'm going to click Done, and we're going to exit that portion of the screen. So that's the information that you need about the vendor updates. Let's go on to the invoice options. There are options tabs in all of the screens, but the ones that I really want to focus on are, first of all, invoices. So we're going to click on the options tab, and up here in the top right-hand corner, when you first receive your program, it will say, click here to click edit to enter your staff names. Erase that, basically go right down to the word edit. And once you click on edit, now you can go ahead and put in all the staff names that you have in here. As time goes by, you may have staff that are no longer in the program or no longer working for you, but their names are still in the program. You can put a hyphen in there and put names of people who are not working there but possibly did in the past underneath that, so that if you still needed to do a search for an order that they created by their name, you could still keep them in the list. Or you can decide that you don't need them in the list, you're not searching for them. Whatever you want to do, it's up to you. But put each person's name on a separate line. The hyphen in here becomes a separating line so that you can actually have a gray line separating out the function and the names in the list. Okay, over here we have the auto terms. Every time you create an invoice, it's going to put the terms in there. And they found that if you had net, or at least net 30 or net 14, the shorter the number of days for people to pay, the more likely they were to pay sooner. So if you wanted to select something to encourage people to pay a little sooner, go ahead and do that. It's up to you. Again, the word edit is at the bottom of that list, so you can go ahead and add that in. Do not remove any of these three items, estimate, quote, or 48-hour approval, because they do specific things in the program that you may want to use in the future. Such as the 48-hour approval will not remove inventory. Quote will change the names from invoice to quote. So it's depending on how you use the program, you want to keep those items in there. The other things to check are, when you're first using the program, I would definitely say pause on preview, yes. Show print dialog box, yes. I'm not sure if I've got it right. I want the option to be able to cancel. However, in your busy season, when things are really frantic, you may want to go to this option of no and no, in which case what it's going to do, it's going to show you the preview still, but it's not going to stop there. What it will do is just instantly show you the preview and print out the page. So it's going to be speed things up. It's a lot faster. If you decide that you don't even need to see the preview, then you can say, I don't want to see a preview at all. I just wanted to print out. The minute I click on the printer icon, it just prints instantly. So I'm going to remove to more options. And when you click on more options, you'll still see the other screen entries on here. Make sure that if you do not sell small retail items, and if you've got a kiosk or your front counter where you're selling lots of small items and it's back to school week and you think, oh my gosh, I need all of these items out as quickly as possible, you're barcoding everything, and then you may want to turn this on, but otherwise leave it set to no. Your sales rep name is in there. If you are a one-person shop, you want to put your name in there because it goes on to every invoice. If you have more than one person in your business, do not put a name in there. And that means that every time that somebody creates an invoice, they need to put their name on. You know who created the invoice, you know who possibly took the payment on it, but you have a person that you can go back to talk to. I would also leave this blank, enter the customer as, but then because this creates that on every auto invoice, if you create an invoice, it just instantly puts a name in there. And in most cases, you don't really need that. Let's go down to the prefix. If you don't want this on here, you can remove it. What it does is when you are putting a work order on there, it'll say framing, semicolon, space, and then the description of the work order follows that. If the art is down below it, then it helps to separate out to say framing on one line and then the art is on the other line. You do not need to have that in there. You can just leave it and it'll just put the description in if you want. Or in Australia, go ahead and check that box. And this means that any cash transactions will be rounded to the nearest nickel, since Canada and Australia do not use pennies in their currency anymore. So we're going to remove that or add that in, depending on the case. The other option here is the print options. Now, we have a number of different layouts that you can use for your invoices. There's not just the one. So I want to take a look at all those options that we have for the invoices. So I'm just going to, and there are the different styles that we have. So on this first one, this is a two-part invoice that's formatted meaning that it has all the boxes. The top portion goes with the customer. The bottom portion can be removable and stay with you. If you want to have pre-printed perforated paper, you could have perforated paper to use. Somebody told me once that there are enough things in Frame Shop that cut paper. There's not a problem with that. So that is option number one. That's two-part formatted. This is a one-part invoice, and on this one I've chosen to have the image printed on there as well, so that if I add an image in on the work order screen, Or if it's a retail product that has an image, it will appear on the printed invoice. If you had multiples on here, it might show, it might go into 2 pages, which in that case, if you don't want to print out 2 pages, you can always email this to the customer as well. But it's nice that they know exactly which image it was. If you had the final piece and you took a digital image of the piece when it's finished, you can also have that appear on their invoice as well. This is with the due date, so you can see the due date on here. And I believe that on this one, yeah, exactly, I did not have the due date show on this one. So you can see that there's no field at all. It's completely blank. So it doesn't even say the word due date. So if I uncheck that option to say I don't want the due date to show, that's what's going to happen there. Okay, and the very last option that we have over on the right here is this one is this is a 1-part unformatted invoice, which means that all the blocks that you can see on this invoice on the left-hand side have been pre-printed, and you have paper that you would specifically put in for the invoice. This was popular when people had their own colored logos and we didn't have colored printers so much. Or if you had a specific printer that was always being used specifically just for invoices. So those are the 3 different styles of invoices that you could be printing out from FrameReady. Back to this screen. So those are your options, the 2-part formatted, 1-part formatted, or you can go unformatted. This is where you can say, I want the due date to appear on the invoice, or I don't want it to appear on the invoice. And again, with the retail products or the work order image. If you don't want them to appear on there, simply select no, and the images will not appear. This is for the receipt printer. If you do have a receipt printer and that's all you're using, you want to move that to yes. Okay, otherwise you can leave it set to no. Number of copies, if you want to have more than 1 copy of it print out, then you do need to say do not show the print dialog box, because once you show the print dialog box, it's going to automatically reset it to the default for your printer, which is 1. So that's why that appears on there. So those are the options that you have in the invoices. Chrissy, it's time for another poll.
I thought you'd never ask. Let me launch it here for you.
Okay.
Which default will you put into practice that you aren't currently using? Setup data, logo, footnotes, and email. Setup data, operations, fiscal, security, and backup. Email messages, work orders, or invoice. I think we're just about voted here, so I will close the poll and we can look at it. Yeah.
Oh, great. So there's things that people can, that have learned in the webinar that they can put into practice. So that's great.
Perfect.
Excellent. Super. Thank you, Chrissy. Okay, we're going to go back into FrameReady again. All right, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the work order options, and there are a lot of them, and they're very helpful. Again, if you're the only person that's in the shop, put your name in there. If not, leave it blank so that people will have to put their names in there. Again, the print preview, if it's just learning, leave it yes and yes. If you want to speed up the process because you're used to it now, change it to no and no. And especially, you can even leave it at yes and yes all the year, but then during a busy time, if holiday seasons are busy for you or vacation time is busy for you, then change it to no and no. So those are the general ones. We're going to go down to more options over here. And under our general options, if you are using an iPad, that's fine. You can add that on there so that you can scan the barcodes on them. This one I find is very important. Some people will uncheck that because they don't want to be bothered to identify which way the artwork goes. What this means with this check mark is that when you create a new work order, the very first question it's going to ask you is which way does the artwork go? And the reason why I think that that is so important is that when I click on new work order, this is the message that I get. Is it horizontal or is it vertical? Or is it square? In which case I'm going to say none. But if I choose one of those items and I decide that it's going to be 20, and I'm going to have to remember to do this incorrectly. and we'll put in another measurement in there. If it's incorrect, an alert message pops up, because nothing's worse than for the framer to see that it's horizontal, but you put in and saying that the height is larger than the width. So it knows that it's incorrect. And it's so easy and fast for you to fix this. All you need to do is click on the icon in between the word width and height and say swap the two numbers, because chances are the orientation is correct. The visual is correct. So when I click swap, it automatically swaps the numbers for me. And even though it's all those fractions, I don't have to re-enter that. So I find that's really helpful for the framer. It reduces the number of errors, and it, you know, for a piece that maybe is abstract even, you know, it helps you to know which end's up. So go ahead and use that. This box is set up so that when you were calculating the molding footage of minimum UI, you can use this. There's a better option though in the price codes file, where you can set up your minimum by the foot to say it's a 4-foot minimum or a 6-foot minimum. So not necessary to use that. If you are using the auto inventory, which you may not start out with right away, don't need to. Later on, you can add that feature in so that it's going to track your inventory and how it's being used. If you work with a lot of limited edition prints, by all means, yes, check the box for yes in here, because what it will do is on the work order, it's going to check for you to make sure if it's art that you have in your gallery and you are framing it and you put the paper size in to say how much of the space of the paper is around the image. That will prevent it. A message will come up saying, are you sure you want to have matte word margins that are smaller than the paper size? It will alert you to that. It's if you turn it on and you're not using it, that's fine too. Don't worry about it. Waste factor when calculating the cost is 20%. That's our average on the FrameReady program. It's not going to change the retail price that you charge to the customer. It's only when you're calculating out the cost of materials used that this 20% is going to come into play. And that's the number that's in the bottom left-hand corner of the work order screen. So it's not going to affect the retail price. This button, this field down here is really important. It must have a value in it, and you cannot have it less than 1. If this is empty, you're going to get a lot of error messages in the program. So if you decide that you want to change that, and let's say you have a double chop miter saw, or you need to calculate a little bit of extra footage, or you recut things as they come in, what this does is it takes the width of the molding and it multiplies it by the number that's in this box. So 1 is going to be accurate. If I decided that I wanted it to be 1.25, then that means it's going to add on 0.25 to the width of any molding. So a 1-inch molding is now going to become 1¼ inches. So it's going to calculate a little bit extra footage for me. You can actually do this individually with suppliers in the price codes file as well. So if you want it to be set to 1 here as the standard, but then go into a specific supplier and say for this supplier, I want it to be 1.25 or 1.35, then you can do that just for that one supplier. The other option that you should look at is the work order defaults. Any of the items that are in this list that you want to have automatically appear every time you create a work order, go ahead and select the item from the list. Do not click into the list and type something, because it's not going to show up. And if it does show up on the work order, it's not going to generate a price, because when that item is in there, it doesn't highlight anything in the box. If I've selected something in here and I go back and I click on it, you can see that that item is highlighted. But if I go in and I say that I've just typed something in instead, you can see that it doesn't match any items in there. It will not create a retail price on the work order for you. Each one of these fields are items that you can change the wording on it. You can modify it to match your business and just go down the list and select the items that you want to appear. However, if you go back to the work order screen and you have selected in here labor and assembly, but on the price codes file, you've changed the item that's called labor and assembly to just plain labor or wood fitting or wood charge or something else, then that means that this becomes an orphaned item and that item is no longer in this list. So you can see that that item isn't in here. So what we want to do now is we want to change it to say what we want to have selected. As long as it's something that's currently active in the list, it will now price it out for that item. So that goes through all of those. You do not need to select the mat board margin defaults unless if you have people that are always putting in too small of a mat board margin, you can go in and put a 3 or a 4-inch mat board margin in there, and then they have to downsize it at the time of the sale. So those are some of the defaults that I find very helpful when you're setting up your FrameReady program. The due date you've already done, we covered that part. The print options we have covered, except that when you're printing out your work order, you've got some extra options. And I do want to show you what the printed work orders look like because you have some options there as well. So here are the printed work order options. This one I think is probably one that's a little bit more popular. This is the printed work order with vertical lines. So these lines are set in place to create grids and formatting. And you'll notice also I don't have the prices showing up on here. So that was another option that I chose. So it has the formatting, but no prices are showing. Another option here is to have without the vertical lines. It's a little bit of a cleaner look, so we don't have the boxes that are created. And on this one, I've actually added the, so it's an option to, if you don't want the people in the back room, if they don't need to see the prices, it keeps the screen a little bit cleaner. That makes it easier for everyone to see the information that they really do need. This option is 2-up. It's called, so that if you decide that you wanted to, you had 2 orders per page, you could do that. The other thing is that some people like this so that they have a bottom portion so that they can draw designs. If you've got really complex designs that you're working on, you can use the bottom portion to draw it. Another option is if you are doing something that's a display box, memorabilia box, shadow box of some kind, you can draw it on the back of the page. And then when you want to print out the work order, flip the page over, print it. So your design is on the back of the page, and then your printed out for the work orders on the front of the page. So that's an option for you as well. There's another one, and this one is a 4 per page. This prints 4 work orders on 1 page. So there would be not room for another 2 if we're on here, but it's a very condensed format. So if you have a shop that has high volume and you've got a lot of orders coming in and you don't want to print 1 per page, this might be an option for you. Now, this is printed very specifically with just 1 button in the FrameReady program. So we'll close these. And I'll show you where that 4 per page prints. So if you want the 2 per page, here's the checkbox for that. If you want the 4 per page, there's the checkbox for that. The vertical with vertical lines or without vertical lines, if the prices appear on there or they don't appear on there. And then again, how many copies you want, your print previews. And then there's also the art ID tag. And you can have the art ID tag print out at the end of the design with the work order, or you can say, I want to print them out individually afterwards. So I'm going to show you the 4 per page and the art ID tag. If you decide that you wanted to print out 4 per page, and let me just go to my list view here because Jim Taylor is the one who has 2 of them. On the printer icon at the top, that will print 1 per page. Even though there's 2 orders for him, it'll print both of them. But if I go over to the left-hand side and I've got the 4 per page checked, when I click on the print this customer's work orders, that is when it's going to print 4 per page because I specifically checked that box. If that box is not checked, what it will do is it will print out a regular work order layout, the same as at the top of the screen. The only difference is that on this, it's going to have at the top of it, it's going to say 1 of 2, 2 of 2 on each one of the work orders that gets printed out. So if that check mark is not checked for 4 per page, that's what this one will do, is it'll print out the full page with the 1 per page, 2 per page. Now the art ID tags that we have, these can be printed out at the end of the day or individually if you want. Whenever you want to print them out at the end of each work order, you can do that as well. It's a great way to identify the art. You can cut them apart. This can go with the art as it goes through the process. And then when the piece is finished, this will be attached to the outside of the brown craft paper package on the end. So people don't have to write on there with magic marker. It's really easy to read and easy to find. And you can even use the barcode scanner to scan it in to the order. Now, those are all the things that we had under the Options tab. There's also the Edit Email Messages. The email messages that come in should be our standard email message here. If you want to change it at all, go ahead and do that. Anything that's in these arrows are fields that we've added in on the left-hand side, where if you want the customer's last name to appear on there, use that and it will insert their first name and their last name. So it's up to you which ones you want to use, how you want to use that. And there's that space where I've added in the Facebook page, our Facebook page, so that when it's sent out in the email is actually a live link so they can click on it and access it. Okay, moving on to the field itself. In the work order screen, there are two fields that I think are very important when you're a new user in FrameReady or you've been using it a long time. And that is one of them, the location field, to identify where the art is being stored before it's framed. Once it's framed, where has it been placed? So we know that it's ready for the customer to pick it up. And then the last one is that it has been picked up. Use the edit field at the bottom of this list to customize your flow process so that in your production flow, you know exactly where pieces are at all times. And when you're looking at your incomplete list, and if I was to go over to click on that, I'm not sure what's in there right now, but I would be able to see that if something has been picked up, I'm going to mark it as completed. If it's incomplete, then I should know exactly where each piece of art is in the process. If you wanted to change these as well to identify, to say that it's gone into one of these bins, that's where the artist picks it up. Now it's into mounting, then it goes over to glazing. So if you want to identify that process, you can do that as well, because then people can go in and say, I want to find everything in mounting, and then use that. We do have a video on production flow that has some great tips on how to use this drop down to manage your production flow and where the art goes. The other field that's on here that is really underused but very important is the artwork button over on the left-hand side. Every piece of artwork, rather than leaving it with just the word artwork on each one, because it defaults to that, go ahead and identify the type of art that you're framing. Is this repairs? Is it memorabilia? Is it a jersey that you're framing? And whatever you've selected on here, if I was to say that this was, it's a print, when I print out the work order, it's actually going to show that word over on the left-hand side. So this is a print of daffodils, a photo of daffodils, a giclée of daffodils, a limited edition print. So whatever the description is, it's a plate, a cup, it's going to show you that right on the work order, which gives more information. And there's some great reports that come out of that as well. So definitely take a look at the location field and the artwork field on the work order. And that's everything that I have to get you started on your FrameReady journey.
That was excellent. Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome. Do we have any questions, Chrissy?
We don't. I'm surprised. I think overall that was a really good webinar, and it's definitely going to help a lot of people, new clients and people or clients that have been with us for a long time. So that was great.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again. Bye.
Bye.